Faith Baptist, just giving us the opportunity to speak on these vitally important issues. I know of a lot of churches and a lot of pastors that wouldn't even want to talk about these topics, let alone have a conference that deals with these. Amen?
Amen.
But the bulk, exactly. So on behalf of all the speakers, if I can do so, I just want to offer a heartfelt thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to do my best to stick with the script because I know how I can talk. And, you know, you put a mic on black folks. We can like, you don't know nothing about that Mickey, though. You know? But anyway, just have a little fun with y'all. Okay, but like I said, I'm going to stick with the script today. First of all, I don't profess to be a deep expositor of God's word. I'll leave that to the far more skilled brothers who will be sharing with you, who have shared with you last night and who will be sharing with you on this day. What I do have is a burning passion for the Lord, His word, His people, and for truth. During my time with you, I'll be speaking with you on the issue of police brutality and seeking to separate the fact from the fiction. While seeking to offer some advice as to how we, as the body of Christ, should examine the often confusing topic of a police use of force. A little bit about me, kind of reiterate go into a little bit more detail as to some of the stuff Miki did in my intro. After leaving the Army in 1992, shortly thereafter, at 22 years of age, I began working for the Indiana Department of Corrections as a corrections officer from 1992 to 1995. A medium security prison, but I had the pleasure of being assigned to the maximum security housing unit. To add a bit more context, Westville, Indiana is about 40 to 50 miles outside of Gary, Indiana, and Chicago, Illinois. Yeah. At that time, Gary had the distinction, I guess for lack of a better word, of being the murder capital of the United States for multiple years in a row. Yeah. And Chicago, well, I mean, I don't even think I need to go into much detail about the unfortunate state of affairs in Chicago. As challenging as that job was, I would say that's where I learned the skills that would help me more than any other skills throughout the course of my law enforcement career. Skills that I wish more officers actually would seek to develop further. And those skills were communication and persuasion. In a prison or jail environment, you don't have a gun, you don't have a baton. You'd be lucky if you have pepper spray. Oftentimes it's you, a set of keys, a radio, a set of handcuffs, and your ability to communicate, or lack thereof. Think about it for a moment. You can be dealing with someone who's got 10, 15, 30 plus years to do for a violent felony offense, and you are tasked with the job of maintaining order and control in that housing unit. How do you convince someone who doesn't want to be there to make his bed every day? I mean, think about it. You got 30 years in prison, make your bed. He has no reason to really cooperate with you other than maybe if you can communicate well with him and articulate yourself. I guess you can like get physical and say, make your bed. You can go grab him and snatch him up, but like why? What would you gain from doing that? You have to be able to talk sensibly and rationally. But anyway, that's a story for another day. In 1996, after moving to Las Vegas and doing casino security work for about a year, I hired on with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, which I'll probably refer to as either Metro or LVMPD throughout the course of this presentation, just to make it a little easier. I hired on with Metro as a CO, corrections officer, and I did that work for about 10 years. In 2006, I decided I needed a little bit of a change, and I attended the LVMPD Patrol Academy to become a police officer. And I finished out my career as a cop on the beat in 2014. Over the years, I was blessed to work in a variety of different capacities, as you can see up on the screen. Just some of the things that I was blessed to work in. When I was at the prison, I was on the prison emergency squad. I worked in gang intelligence when I was in the jail. I was a defensive tactics instructor, firearms instructor, active shooter instructor, terrorism liaison officer, and crisis intervention team officer. And that primary function of a crisis intervention team is when you're dealing with suspects or subjects who are in a drug-related or a mental health crisis. This right here is an article from the South Bend Tribune, a newspaper in Indiana, that was written by a former inmate, or it was the story of a former inmate, who spoke on the dangerous conditions he endured while being housed at Westville Correctional Center. Sadly, he was spot on. Violent gangs, sexual assaults, extortion, inept or corrupt officers. It was a terrible environment and not a great place to work, to be completely honest with you. The good thing about this, though, thankfully, this article exposed a lot of the problems that went on at that prison and led to massive changes for the better. This is my Corrections Officer Academy graduating class. If my mouse, I don't think my mouse shows up, but the arrows, my big old milk dud head right there in the background. This is me graduating from the Patrol Academy in 2007. I blacked out some of the faces to make it look like all official, you know, like they're all covert operatives or something like that. No, I mean, I blacked it out because some of them do like investigative work. And, you know, I don't want to put them out there like that. I was giving a class speech at that academy. And throughout the course of my career, amongst all the ups and downs, I would say that I love what I did. I got to meet some pretty amazing people and got to do some pretty cool things. And believe it or not, I actually did more than just take photos. I actually fought crime. But throughout all the ups and downs, as I was saying, I would have to say that I really loved what I did. In my honest opinion, when done rightly, and I emphasize when done rightly, there are few jobs more honorable than that of a law enforcement officer. Protecting and serving can be extremely challenging, often thankless, yet very rewarding. Those of you who are familiar with me and my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, Code Red Conversations, knows that I have no issue and no problem, honestly, calling out the problems that have plagued law enforcement from its inception, and even now when necessary, even when it puts me at odds with other officers. I've always sought to be honest regarding what goes on, the issues related to law enforcement, regardless of the consequences. And this brings me to an issue that had a profound impact on my law enforcement career. While going through field training, which is basically on-the-job training for a police officer after they graduate the police academy, one of my training officers instigated a conflict with an inmate. Why? I truly have no idea why. I don't know if it was bravado or if he wanted to test me to see if I had what it took to do the job or how I would respond. I remember him inciting an inmate, entering his cell with another officer, and brutalizing this man. Just because he didn't like the way he looked at him. I did assist in restraining the inmate, but I refused to do anything else. I even remember him, that inmate, it was a black man. He looked at me after it was all said and done. They picked him up off the ground, blood streaming down his face, and he looked at me and he said, "Man, how are you gonna let them do that to me?" And every time I bring that up, I get emotional about it. Every time I tell that story. And that ate me up inside. But you have to understand, there was so much going on in our lives at the time. Here I was, the primary breadwinner for my family. I had just left a job that paid me $7 an hour doing security. And this job would more than double my pay instantly. And could potentially, in the long term, if you think about promotions and longevity on the job, I could make probably upwards of 7 times that. Add to the fact that my daughter sitting up here with her little French hat on, or wee and whatnot. Sorry, babe, I love you. At that time, she was 7 months old. 7 months old. And I knew this career could be life-changing for us. I did confront the officer and challenge him as to why he did what he did. I told him that I wasn't a rookie at corrections. I may have been new to Metro Police, to the county jail, but this wasn't my first rodeo. I just did 3 years in the prison system. Working. But I told him that I wasn't a rookie at this, and I never had to treat an inmate like that. I mean, there are times where I've had to get physical and break up an altercation or restrain someone, but just simply laying hands on somebody, just simply because of the fact that I wanted to test, just because I didn't like the way they looked at me, that was just like completely foreign to me. Unfortunately, when it was all said and done, it was his word against mine. And only thing I gained from that was the reputation of being a snitch amongst the law enforcement officers, the officers there. And I remember going home that evening, and I broke down in front of my wife. I understood that this job could be so much for us, and we wouldn't have to struggle anymore. We just wouldn't. Life was so, we were living in a weekly. We had gotten evicted. Side note, we had gotten evicted from our apartment. We were living in a weekly just prior to me hiring on with the police department. But I knew that if they wanted me to act like this, that I couldn't do the job. Wow. I knew that, and I wouldn't have done that. I would have had to leave and just start all over again. Wow. Thankfully, with that incident behind me, I ultimately built my own reputation over the years. No, I wasn't the perfect cop by any stretch of the imagination. But I'd like to think that those who knew me and how I worked, whether officer, citizen, inmate, or suspect, knew that regardless of our interaction, respect was always my primary goal. I say all this to say to you that yes, police brutality is real. I'm not one of those ones who tries to say that it isn't. I've seen it. I believe that it would be an insult and a tremendous injustice to those who have suffered at the hands of those who have pledged to protect and serve. In the area of bigotry or racism or bias, growing up in the 70s and 80s, I can go on and on about how me and my family were treated by some of the white people in our community at the time. We weren't far removed from the civil rights movement, especially considering the fact that we were the only black family in that area. It was often very clear to us that we were not welcome. From someone yelling the N-word at us at random, just because they could, when I was 7 years old, just walking down the street, or being cussed out by police and told that we were in the wrong blanking neighborhood. We need to go back where we came from. It was almost a part of our everyday lives. At school, there was a lot more diversity. How did that fare for us? Well, it may not be how you would think. For those that think that bigotry, racism, bias can only come from white people, and I may step on a few toes here, but I'm just going to call it as I've seen it. I beg to differ. You see, we spoke oftentimes too white, or my skin tone was too dark for some of the other black kids, for me to fit in. I'm sure some of y'all can totally understand what I'm talking about. Some of y'all, I see some of y'all darker than me, so I know I ain't the only one that. On many occasions, the teasing would escalate to threats of violence, just because I was different. And it came from kids who looked just like me, or similar to me. Again, I share all this with you to show to you that my experiences are broad. And I've seen bad and ugliness come from all sides of the equation. I'd like to think that my life experiences puts me in a unique position to openly discuss these issues. I also think, and I really want to emphasize this point, I also think I'd be doing a huge disservice if I did not recognize the massive changes, and I mean massive changes, that have occurred in my lifetime amongst the various ethnic groups. Our culture has changed. In spite of what you may be hearing from the mainstream media, from Hollywood, and many political pundits, oftentimes just to incite us to get our vote.
Yep, that's right.
Regarding our primary topic, though, the police. I would argue that for every occasion of police misconduct or carelessness, there are many others seeking to perform their jobs in a just manner. Voices and actions that are rarely seen. One reason being that good news simply doesn't sell. This isn't the call that I've been on, but I've been on incidents just like that. And there were white brothers and sisters, when I say brothers and sisters, sometimes I say that as a police officer, who were right there trying to talk men and women down that didn't look anything like them. But will you ever see that on your local news? Most likely you will not. And if I get a little fired up, that's why I stay on script, because if I get going on this topic, I'll really get going.
Come on,
but I've seen people out there putting their lives on the line for people that didn't look like them. And you won't see that on CNN. But let me just be real with you. You won't see that because people want you angry.
Yeah. That's right. Come on.
Forgive me, y'all. Forgive me. Okay, I done lost track of where I'm at. I appreciate y'all being gracious with me.
Take your time, Eric.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. In our desire to better understand the issues related to police use of force, we must be willing to ask some tough questions. The first one being, what is the true reality of a police use of force in our present day, or police brutality? Are cops out of control in regarding to the killing of black men? Are things as bad as they were 30, 40, 50 plus, even 50 plus years ago? The data, what does the data show us? What do the actual stats and numbers say about the police, and how does it compare to the mainstream media sources? News, celebrities, whomever. These are just some of the things that we should seek to better understand before coming to any conclusions one way or another. But before we go there, please allow me to take you on a little bit of a trip. You see, y'all, I'm used to speaking and teaching cops, and we're pretty simple. We're pretty simple people. We ain't always the smartest. I'm sure some of y'all done dealt with us. Y'all already know this. We ain't always the smartest. We ain't always necessarily the brightest. But we like to keep things simple, and we like visual aids. We like to be stimulated. Ooh, you got pictures of that. Right there, and like when I was going, when we would have it, we'd have to teach during the academy or whatever, when I was with Metro, and after every session, we would have to be evaluated. We have to hand out an evaluation sheet. And man, if you put some slides in there and a couple of videos, you knew you was getting at least an 80. You knew that at least you were going to get that. So I'm trying to at least get an 80 here today. Hopefully it'll be a little more than that when it's all said and done. But before we go there, please allow me to take you on a little bit of a trip, an unusual trip. But I think as time goes on, you'll see the point I'm trying to make. Like, a little bit of a trip through time. Okay, real quick, don't say nothing yet. You might be dating yourself a little bit, but I don't think most of y'all don't really care one way or another. What's this? Charles. Give yourself a round of applause. Give yourself a round of applause. Very good. I have a little video up there, like the intro. Remember the lady, they're in the water? So I figured the little kids here might freak them out, so I decided I was going to put that in there. All right. I think most of us are familiar with the summer blockbuster nowadays. Like every summer, some major movie comes out, and it's like the Avengers or all the Marvel movies. And remember back in the late 90s, it was like Will Smith. He'd always have something big coming out. Or some of y'all probably don't never watch Bad Boys. I didn't either. I'm saying. I don't even know what that movie. I found it doing my research. but anyway, I'm joking. I ain't lying in the house of the Lord. I'm joking. But I think most of us are familiar with the summer blockbuster. But Jaws has a distinction of being the first, because you see, prior to that, most Hollywood executives thought that families didn't want to be stuck in a movie theater watching a movie. They figured during summer vacation when the kids are off, the families would rather pick up and travel and go somewhere and do something else. Steven Spielberg and whoever else was behind the movie, they changed the game, and in a short time, Jaws became the highest grossing film in North American history back in 1975, 76, at that time. And it held that distinction for quite a while. But it also held an unusual distinction, or had an unusual impact on the culture. But I'll be getting back to that. Keep that in mind.
Welcome to Atlanta's Olympic Stadium for the opening ceremony of these Centennial Olympic Games.
On July 27, 1996, at the Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia, at approximately 1 a.m., a nail-laden pipe bomb inside a green backpack was discovered by security guard Richard Jewell. After alerting authorities, and while efforts were being made to clear the area, the bomb went off, killing Alice Hawthorne and injuring over 100 other people. During the initial investigation, Richard Jewell was credited with discovering the bomb and potentially saving countless lives. But that was not the end of the story. And we will be getting to that as well. As the slide states, this is the Duke lacrosse team sexual assault investigation. In March of 2006, during an off-campus party, members of the Duke lacrosse team invited some dancers over for some entertainment. An argument ensued, resulting in the women leaving separately and leaving earlier than expected. One of the dancers, Crystal Mangum, photo up there, later stated that she had been dragged into the bathroom and was beaten and raped repeatedly by multiple members from the team for half an hour. What do these events have in common? Let's review.
In the summer of 1975, beach attendance fell nationwide. The drop in beach attendance was credited to both the success of the film, which saw millions of Americans flock to the cinemas, as well as the fact that it kind of made them scared to go in the water. Speaking of which, the film is still criticized today for painting an unnecessarily harsh and objectively incorrect picture of sharks, which hardly ever attack humans. However, the success of Jaws saw shark attacks not only being reported upon more often, creating the false impression that they were more common than they actually are, but also a more negative perception of the animal, which led to many of them being killed for no real reason.
Were you guys able to hear that clearly?
Yes. That's some good work he just did.
A drop in beach attendance took place after the film was released. Why? People viewing the film in droves, they were doing things other than going to the beach. 2, many people became fearful of going into the water out of concerns for a shark attack, which in all actuality, regarding a shark attack, is a very rare event. There's actually, during my research for this, there's an actual, at the University of Florida, they actually keep a shark attack file. Like, I was like, what the heck? People keep files for everything. I mean, but that was pretty cool. 3, a negative impression of sharks in general resulted due to the movie's massive success. So, I'm gonna read this slide off to you here. For Americans, the lifetime risk of dying from a shark attack is approximately 1 in 3.7 million. That means you have a greater chance of dying from heart disease, 1 in 5, being killed by lightning, 1 in nearly 80,000, or experiencing death by fireworks, 1 in 340 plus thousand. But after that film came out, when you see this crazy shark trying to climb up on a boat and slaughtering people, people were terrified. People were terrified. And am I saying that people shouldn't be fearful of a shark? I mean, they are dangerous. I mean, listen, don't be dumb. Don't be dumb about it. But in light of, the issue was a massive amount of media attention was thrust upon the idea of a shark attack, and it fed people's fears. Media attention, shark attack, fed the fears. Media attention, shark attack, fed the fear.
Yes.
I'm just starting, y'all. I'm just starting. According to this study, it came out in 2003, but the study was from 2002.
I can learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with you.
Well, they can understand me.
That's all right.
I don't even know what she is up there. I don't even use that name. I feel I'm being oppressed. I'm afraid to use this, and I don't want to jack this thing up here.
Okay, then.
Oh, it's gone? Okay, all right. There you go. All right, knock me out of my game. That's Satan. Get thee behind me.
All right.
Anyway.
It's just serious.
I think it's like a quote. But according to this study, it came out in 2003. At that time, there were only 3 documented cases worldwide of sharks killing people. Worldwide, 3 documented cases. A 2017 article stated that on average, sharks are responsible for 12 deaths a year. 12. And that you are more likely to die from an elephant attack or vending machine falling on you. For real. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I'm one of those people, like, when people do CrossFit, they like tell everybody about it? Yeah. Like, we're on keto, and I like to have to I'm one of the annoying people that have to tell everybody about it. But like, so I don't do like I don't do the vending machines anymore, Anyway, totally irrelevant, I know. But I know when I used to want that bag of Doritos, and I put my money in because I wouldn't do it illegally, of course, and I'm saved. Remember that, y'all. But when that money, my bag was stuck, I shake that bad boy. I wasn't worrying about that thing falling on me. But you're more likely to die from that than from a shark attack.
My goodness.
It's crazy. But on the flip side of that, an estimated 26 to 100 million sharks are killed every year out of fear, people hunting them down, or for their fins. 26 to 100 million every year. Regarding Richard Jewell, as I mentioned earlier, Jewell was initially hailed as a hero. There's a movie out about him. I don't know, has anyone seen it? I'm gonna check it out. I haven't seen it yet. Investigators began looking at him somewhat suspiciously after the FBI received a call from a former president of a college where Jewell had once worked as security. A deeper background search found other witnesses who claimed that he had employment issues and an obsession with law enforcement. Once that data was leaked to a local Atlanta newspaper, the media frenzy soon followed.
FBI has a suspect. Read all about it.
I remember saying to my editor, this man's life will never be the same, simply because he suddenly was in the eye of this media storm.
Are they letting you go to work? They're letting you go to work. You're free to go. Did they tell you now not to leave town? No. Did you do it? Can you categorically say that you did not do this? I did not do it. Categorically.
Now, there were many who had a hand in defaming Richard Jewell. Once the news sources and publications got a hold of it, his life was forever transformed, and it wasn't for the better.
Some of the coverage, while acknowledging that Jewell was only under investigation, still cast him in the worst possible light.
The hero may be a possible villain. You get a different picture of Richard Jewell in these North Georgia mountains. He lived alone in this rented home with his Doberman dogs, most days with the blind drawn.
Once Richard Jewell did come in, it became very apparent over the next few weeks that there's no reason to charge him.
Richard Jewell finally got what he's been waiting for. A hand-delivered letter from the Justice Department says, based on the evidence developed to date, Jewell is not considered a target of the federal investigation.
Jewell pursued legal action against several news organizations, citing, among other things, a column that implied a comparison between Jewell and a convicted murderer, and another that called him a fat, failed former sheriff's deputy.
In the end, Jewell sued CNN, NBC, and the New York Post, ultimately settling out of court. All of that from a phone call and a little bit of investigation that kind of threw a little bit of doubt on the man's character, without any true facts. For the sake of time, I'm just going to go through and highlight the details of the Duke lacrosse case. But for anyone who's interested in further details, I would highly, highly recommend the ESPN 30 for 30 documentary titled Fantastic Lies. Fantastic Lies, ESPN 30 for 30 documentary. If you have not seen it, it is powerful and it is chilling. But this case is a textbook example of the dangers that can come from making assumptions of guilt simply based on the ethnicity of the alleged offenders involved. And I'm talking about regardless of being black, white, brown, red, yellow, whatever the case may be. Assumptions of guilt by the Gang of 88, which were members of the Duke University staff, as well as local and national news agencies. Assumptions of guilt by the District Attorney, Mike Nifong, before any police report, DNA evidence, or any true investigation had ever even begun. Assumptions of guilt by many local leaders and classmates seeking quote-unquote justice and calling for the teammates to be castrated. Again, all prior to any true data, all prior to any trial. All of this was based solely on an allegation from one woman with a history of mental health problems and almost no corroborating evidence. The other stripper who was there at the party completely denied most of the claims that were made about the events. In the end, the young men were acquitted. Some of the reasons, when it was determined that DA, District Attorney Mike Nifong, seeking re-election, hear me on this, please hear me on this, y'all. Seeking re-election had intentionally doctored the police lineup, using only photos of white Duke lacrosse team members, basically ensuring that some of them will be picked out as suspects. But that goes against any rules, or as far as what I know, as far as how a lineup is supposed to be conducted. He also intentionally, the same district attorney Nifong, who was seeking re-election, he also intentionally suppressed DNA evidence that would have cleared the accused team members.
Wow.
He withheld that information from them in order that they would be, because you see, like in the area that this was going on, there was a lot of issues, and people were looking at it because you had these white Duke lacrosse team members, privileged men, as the people in the culture, and people were assuming that they were wrong, that it had to have happened because a black woman said it. And let's be honest with you, I mean, we all know, like, people lie. I don't care what color you are. People lie.
Yes.
And just coming to that conclusion just based on someone's outer shell, how ridiculous is that? I mean, do I even need to say Jussie, the name Jussie Smollett?
All right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, do I even need to go there? I mean, I can go on and on. I mean, like I said, this Jussie's a black man. This is a white dude up here doing. I mean, you know, the sin nature, regardless of what your skin color is, we're all victims. That's the issue we all deal with. Every one of us. I'm about to get there. Thank you. Help me stay on track. This ultimately led to Nifong being disbarred and facing other criminal charges. But from what I recall, like, he basically got a slap in the hand. He should have got hammered for this. Yeah. But like I said, there was a lot of politicking going on, and unfortunately, that's the world we're living in. What do these events have in common? I'm glad you asked. The mainstream media influencing the opinions of the masses.
That's right. That's right.
2, people coming to conclusions about an incident without waiting for all the facts.
That's it.
Sometimes with zero information. Mm-hmm. And let's be honest with you, we're all guilty of that at some time or another. Every one of us. I know I have been. And 3, personal biases influencing beliefs. Are we seeing the pattern, folks? Can we see how the mainstream media can often influence public opinion, for better or for worse? Yes, an ugly or questionable history can be a factor and shouldn't be ignored. Should not be ignored. But should we allow this to be the sole determining factor? Should we as believers who have been transformed by the grace of God always assume the worst in people? Or should we be the first to seek truth, compassion, and understanding? In the remaining time that I have with you today, I will seek to demonstrate that the prevailing narrative on the police has oftentimes been grossly exaggerated, and in the end can be destructive to all sides. The reality of police brutality. That rhymed and I wasn't even trying. But let's lay out a few facts here so that we can get a better perspective on this entire situation. I'm gonna put out some numbers here, and I want you to, if you need to write them down or whatever, I want you to think about this when we look at this everything that we've been fed, all the numbers that we've been given about deaths and police brutality. I want you to look at this thing from I'm trying to give you like a 10,000-foot view so you can frame all of these situations much better. There are an estimated somewhere between 500,000 and 1.5 million police officers here in the United States. Some would put the number even as high as 2 million. Unfortunately, there are a lot of agencies that are smaller, and it's hard to keep tabs of the exact numbers. But we're looking at, like I said, 500,000 to approximately 2 million cops in the United States. According to the National Institute of Justice, these officers conduct an average of 40 million contacts with the public every year. Others put the number, would suggest that the number is closer to 100 million. I would have a tendency to want to put that number high because there are a lot of small things that cops do. They might be demonstrating a difference between a criminal contact and just an average contact with an average everyday citizen. But less than 1% of these contacts require a use of force beyond handcuffing and low-level control.
Wow.
Less than 1%. Further research conducted by, and I try to put sources up here other than FBI, Department of Justice. I try to be broad with my sources because somebody might think that there could be some level of bias. So I reached and I sought sources that came from all different places, some that aren't even pro-law enforcement. Further research conducted by the Journal of Trauma and Acute Care Surgery from 2018 showed that out of over 1 million police contacts, force was used in 0.086%, or 1 in nearly 1,200, 1 in 1,167. In a reported 114,064 criminal arrests, force was used in only 0.78%, or 1 in 128 of these arrests. 114,000 criminal arrests, force was used less than 1% of the time. Have you heard any of these stats and figures before? I'm sure some of y'all, this is the first time you're hearing this.
Right.
And all I'm trying to do is let you know that there's other information out there.
Yeah.
And we need to be holistic as we approach how we evaluate this information.
That's good, Eric.
What does the data show in regard to whether the police are out of control? Now let's first remember the numbers that I put out. How many officers did I say are out there approximately?
Between 500,000 and 1 million.
Thank you, y'all listening. Thank you very much. Conducting how many contacts with the public?
40 million to 100 million.
I don't know about y'all, that's a lot of contacts
Yeah.
with the public. But before we proceed, I want to make it very clear that I am in no way, because I'm going to be laying out some figures about police-related deaths. In no way am I seeking to minimize these deaths. In no way. We, as Christ followers, should always mourn when a fellow image bearer of God loses his or her life.
That's good, brother.
These men and women, and sometimes even children, regardless of their actions, have friends and family members that will never be the same as a result of these horrific events. Yet even with that, we cannot ignore or overlook reality when seeking to understand the details of these confrontations. We can mourn with those who mourn, while at the same time strive to diligently know the truth. Simply put, if you see a video or questionable police encounter, you aren't wrong for wanting to know more of the details. Nor should you allow someone to make you feel guilty for asking. Like if there's a video that comes up and you say, I want to know what took place before that video popped up. That's a good question to ask. There's nothing wrong with that. Proverbs 18:2 says, a fool takes no delight in understanding, but only in airing his own opinion. My prayer is that we would never take the path of the fool. I'll be wrapping up here real shortly, brother. Thank you. Okay, back to 2019. As of the time of doing this research, according to the Washington Post, the police killed 950 people in 2019. The ethnic breakdown, 322 were white, 211 black, 150 Hispanic, 191 were unknown, I guess, at the time of them doing the research, and 34 were other. Oftentimes, the initial response is to assume some level of bias because blacks make up only 13% of the population, and it's easy to come to that conclusion, especially when you consider the oftentimes ugly history of law enforcement in this country. We can't deny that. Yes, we should be willing to deal with that possible reality. we must also be open and honest enough to deal with cultural differences within small segments of various groups. For instance, men make up less than 50% of the population, but yet we comprise over 93% of the prison population. Less than 50% of the U.S. population, but over 93% of the prison population. This is according to the Federal Bureau of Prison Statistics. Are we to assume that it's bias or bigotry is the reason behind this disparity? Or could there be another reason? Is it possible that there could be another reason that men are more prone to get locked up? Or maybe more prone to violence? Is that a possibility? That's all I want y'all to just to consider. There could be other factors in these incidents. We shouldn't always just assume it to be racially motivated. It could be, but maybe not. When we further examine these numbers, of those 950 shootings, 85% of those involve weapons, involved armed citizens. 950 shootings, or 950 deaths, 85% involved armed citizens. What should the officer do in that situation? If it's you, if your or even more so, if your child is dealing with that, your child is the officer, and he comes in contact with someone with a gun, who's potentially threatening his or her life. What should they do? Should they become a victim? I'm just laying out some numbers, y'all. I'm laying out some facts and figures, hoping to get y'all to think a little bit differently, be a little more open-minded that there may be more going on than what you're being given. I think we sometimes forget that police work isn't about delivering flowers. Let's be real. These men and women's primary function is to do what? Deal with crime, stop crime. That's their primary function. And sometimes they come face to face with evil. It's out there. I mean, some of us don't want to think about that until it comes on your doorstep. But trust me, I've seen evil face to face and it ain't pretty. According to the Washington Post, of these 950 shootings, 42 were unarmed. Another important point that I would definitely like to make before my time is up with y'all is that for every police, that we shouldn't assume that because someone is unarmed that there's no threat. In every police encounter, there involves weapons, potential weapons. The one possessed by the officer, his gun, his taser, his baton. And every year there are officers who lose their lives because the suspect takes the gun and uses it on them. Every year it happens. The Census Bureau stated that in 2017, 716 people were killed by what is known as personal weapons, punches, kicks, knee strikes, so on and so forth. If you add strangulation, asphyxiation, and suffocation, the number of lives lost rise closer to 1,000 every year. No gun, no weapon, other than their bare hands. That's according to the FBI. Are things as bad as they were 30, 40, 50 plus years ago? According to the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice, an organization that isn't necessarily known for being conservative or pro-law enforcement, while noting the often wide disparity, as I mentioned previously, disparity of police killings amongst the different ethnic groups, recognize that the rate of police killings of blacks has fallen 70% over the last 40 to 50 years. 70%. I use the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice as a concept, kind of like the concept of using like a hostile witness. They have nothing to gain by reporting this information if they're kind of negative on law enforcement. Why would they report this information if it wasn't factual? The same report noted that police-related deaths of citizens, black male citizens 25 years of age or older has declined by 61% since the late 1960s. Am I necessarily celebrating these numbers? No. Yet I ask you to ask yourself, because of course we would love to see the numbers to be zero, but that's not the world we live in. That's why I'm not necessarily going to celebrate and shout from the rooftops about it. But it's good to see that there has been a decline. Yet I ask you to ask yourself, how often do I get this kind of information? Ask yourself that. And if it's rarely, ask yourself why. You know how many pages of Google I had to go through to get to some of these numbers?
Oh my goodness.
Like you type up how many police officers were killed in 2018, everything you're going to get is about all the evils that police have done. That's going to be the first 5 or 6 pages.
That's right.
I mean, that's just being real.
That's right.
Like I said, we are not denying the reality of police brutality. I gave it a circumstance where I saw it face to face. And for the sake of time, I'm already running over. I thought I was going to do real good. But anyway. But I've seen many over the course of my career. So no one here is denying that. Folks, we have only touched the tip of the iceberg with the facts that I could have shared with you today. I had to cut out a ton more data just for the sake of time. The unfortunate reality is that when there is an unfounded, and I'm emphasizing unfounded mistrust of the police, there are many possible victims. Ultimately, the ones who will suffer the most are those who live in the very communities who need police protection the most. My goal today was to give you some things to think about or to consider wherever you may stand on some of the issues dealing with police brutality. Proverbs 18:17 says, "The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him." My prayer and my hope is as we struggle through these oftentimes complex issues, that we would all be truth seekers first, putting aside personal opinions so that we would honor and glorify our Lord first and foremost. Amen. Thank you very much.